And speaking of that, I wanted to get your reaction real quick. This is another piece of evidence that I'm putting in the vibe check category. Even Joe Rogan now is out here saying that he believes Kamala Harris is going to win the 2024 election. Let's take a look at just a little bit of this and get your reaction.
It all bothers me, the fragility of the human mind. You know, that we're so everybody forever was like, Kamala Harris is the worst vice president. She's the least popular vice president of all time. And then in a moment in time, all of a sudden she's our solution. She's our hero. Everybody's with her. All these social media posts about her. Try Googling.
And by the way, just to cut in real quick, it is kind of true that, you know, Kamala Harris was not viewed as this savior figure a year or two ago. If anything, Democrats were terrified of making her the nominee because of how seemingly unpopular she was and how seemingly incompetent she was, like in press appearances and interviews and things like that. But I think the kind of funny admission in this line of attack from right wingers is like, okay, then why is Donald Trump having such a hard time going up against her?
They're pretending it's manufactured, as opposed to the fact that the reports have been that the Biden administration deliberately sidelined her. They didn't want her out there because it would draw a contrast to his age and his senility. And so she was in the background. She wasn't able to look, she's just a pleasant person, I think, generally, in the way that she comes across, right? She doesn't need to be, she's not a very talented stump speaker, but when she gets one-on-one, she laughs and people are like, okay, she seems kind of normal, especially in contrast to Donald Trump. So that's why her popularity is surging. Biden's unpopularity was the anchor around her popularity ratings. And then she also wasn't in the public eye, so she just got tied to Biden the entire time.
Yep. Yeah. Anyway, again, I think it's pretty hilarious that if Kamala is so terrible and so unpopular, then again, why is Donald Trump having such a hard time going up against her? It should be the easiest thing in the world. And why didn't they have this playbook ready to go? Republicans have been, spinning conspiracy theories for the entirety of Biden's presidency that this was all going to happen, that he would be swapped out at the last minute, that if not Kamala, Michelle Obama would be implemented in his stead. These conspiracy theories were already widely outlined and acknowledged by the Republican Party. They were low-key right, but now they're not prepared. They're not at all prepared, and they're spinning around in circles trying to figure out how to attack this woman. Are you kidding me? You've had 4 years to dig up Oppo research and to get this whole campaign ready. Apparently, they were just sitting on their hands and hoping that it would be Biden.
Exactly. And you can hear Trump. I've been listening to way too many of Trump's like full-length interviews and speeches and things like that. He keeps talking about Biden. He can't stop talking about Biden and how, the Biden's the guy. Bro, I mean, he has become the senile old guy who's rambling and not making any sense. That's what Democrats are doing in terms of just like flipping the narrative. He wishes so badly he were running against Biden that he can't update his software and actually adjust it for Kamala Harris. But when he does, it just turns into rank racism because he
doesn't have anywhere else to go. And
nowhere.
And his base is rejecting it, right? We were talking about this earlier. My own father texted me yesterday, and he's like, what are the black jobs that they're taking away? This is a fucking Republican his whole life, a Trump voter. And I think the Riz is wearing off. It's like, I was going to vote for him because another old kind of a guy.
This is his third campaign. This is his third campaign in America for president. So.
And also, that's the other unspoken elephant in the room for Kamala. She's never been president before. Everybody else has tried and failed. All the other options tried and failed.
Exactly.
Yep. Let's take a look at just a couple more seconds of this because I want to hear Joe Rogan actually make his prediction, and then we'll react to that because I actually agree with his prediction.
Shift in the way people access information, and this is Robert Epstein's work.
The Creepy Line, the documentary. Everyone should watch it.
Yeah, and this thing is very real, and what it is like if you try to Google certain negative stories, like negative stories on people, it will overwhelm you with positive stories. It'll take a long time before you get to the negative stories.
Yeah, how he explained it is here's how they can tip the scale.
Yeah.
If I Google Hillary Clinton and I have it so Google gives fairly positive stories about Hillary as the first 10 results, you're not going to go to the second page. If I Google Donald Trump and Google gives you 7 negative stories, it's going to move the needle a little bit toward her.
Quite a bit.
Him. Yeah.
Quite a bit. Like if you're a person who's on the fence, you're like, maybe Donald Trump's not a bad guy. And then you Google him and then you start reading some of these like pieces that they've written about him. It'll change your perspective.
You really think she's going to win?
I'm saying it because she could. I'm not saying it because I think she's going to, and I'm not saying because I want her to. I'm just being honest. Like I could see her winning.
I think she's going to lose a lot of the black male vote.
Really?
I don't think they're going to.
Yeah, right.
This
is also the same episode where Joe Rogan tries to get this guy to believe that the State of the Union address was not taped live. He's like, "Oh, I saw Joe Biden's watch, and it's the wrong time, bro." And this guy's like, "Dude, the State of the Union is live. There's like, this House Speaker there. He's a Republican. Like, he's not gonna tolerate that." Or what about Fox News? You think they're just not gonna cover that they taped the State of the Union when it's supposed to be live? And he's like, "I don't know, bro. You don't know what they knew. They just get the feed. They just get the feed." And the dude's like, "No, dude, it's not a feed. It's like hundreds of people from Congress come to Washington, D.C. and watch it.
Have reporters in the back of the room that are there too. Yeah.
Mike Johnson standing right behind him. You think he might have blown the whistle if this was some sort of play acting? Absurd. Yeah,
he probably didn't know, man. Real life hologram. You don't know what the deep state's got down there. No, I swear, bro. It's very,
dude. They hyped him up with they pumped him up with all the drugs they were saying the Republicans were saying Biden needed to perform. I'm sure that's what happened. He had his Addy dose and he went out there and he performed a speech because he can still read. He just can't talk extemporaneously. Rogan, part of the reason that first of all, 2% of the country doesn't have an opinion on Donald Trump. I mean, I think that might be a literal figure. There's been polling done in terms of do you have an opinion or do you not have an opinion of this person? And I saw a week before Biden dropped out, Biden and Trump are in single digits, low single digits, because everybody knows them because of their visibility. Trump, again, this is his third election cycle. Kamala Harris at that point, about a week before Biden dropped out, was 22%. And you know what that means? That means that 22% of the country is undecided and they're gettable. And then when Biden dropped out, I think the figures in terms of who was considering voting for a third party candidate just completely fell down, as well as the double hater dynamic that Nate Cohn of the New York Times talks about, where there were people who were just considering sitting out the entire election because they hated both Trump and Biden, which was a massive problem. That's why, again, Nancy Pelosi, huge disagreements on ideology, but respect her pragmatism and that dog in her, right? So she was a huge part of why Biden dropped out. She forced the issue because she saw that actually the fundamentals for Democrats are really, really positive. There are 2 abortion ballot measures in swing states. And by the way, a third in Florida, which is a massive state that Kamala's pouring resources into. I saw some criticism of that. I actually love that idea because it's a long-term play.
Ballot in Florida.
Weed's on the ballot, great point. And I know that in Florida, they need 60%, but it still is going to drive turnout, I think, in the Democrats' favor. So that's a really, really dark horse state for the Democrats.
What's the Village that Ryan Grimm wrote that awesome article about they had a parade of people that had their Kamala Harris things on their golf carts. And dude, if you've watched the documentary or read Ryan Grimm's piece about the Villages, it's Trump country, man. So that is a big deal. He
won by 65 or 67% in the Villages in the last 2 election cycles, Donald Trump. So the fact that they're having a parade for her and weed and abortion is on the ballot in Florida, regardless, it's just a good long-term play for the state to not cede that to the Republicans and make Trump diverge resources he would be putting on in other states into his home base of Mar-a-Lago in Florida. So I like that. But with abortion on the ballot in Arizona and Nevada, 2 of the most important states for Democrats, and the negative partisanship about Republicans being so strong, the fact that they underperformed in 2022, everything is set up for the Democrats to do really well electorally. The one thing is just that the Senate map isn't as favorable to them. But that was the problem with Biden. It was not an issue with the Democrats, who have done some good things domestically over the past 3 or 4 years. It was an issue with Biden specifically. And that was the biggest problem. And it took Nancy Pelosi forcing the issue for him to finally recognize it.
I did want to just get your final thoughts on this election, because in my opinion, the writing is on the wall. I think that Kamala Harris would have to massively massively fumble this in order to actually lose to Donald Trump in November. And I know it's still very early. The polls still show it as a bit of a dead heat, but guys, we still have the convention. She hasn't received her convention bump yet. She still hasn't even picked her vice president, regardless of who that is. Even if it disappoints us, that's going to be another round of media, a lot of excitement about that. Donald Trump, not only has he already picked his vice president, but his vice president was a total dud, proving to be more of an albatross around his neck every day in this campaign season, taking away all the attention from Trump, and not in a good way. It's not like JD Vance is upstaging him because of how awesome he is and how much he's beloved. No, it's for the exact opposite reason. So that's a huge problem for Trump. Trump can't figure out how to message on abortion. He can't figure out how to distance himself properly from Project 2025. He's totally lost control of the narrative. I see him, more defeated and out of touch, out of Riz than he's ever before been. Like I said, I think it's very, very clear that Kamala is headed to victory, and potentially a substantial victory. We already saw a bit of the cope coming from people like Joe Rogan as they also start to see the writing on the wall saying, I don't think this is such an easy race anymore, guys. I think, this isn't going to be so fun for us. So how do you predict that right-wing media is going to react in the coming months as they start to realize that not only will the Democrats probably win in November, but they could be looking at the end of the MAGA movement as we know it? Because I don't know if Donald Trump will survive after a second loss. What do you think?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot there. And I think you're probably right. I hate making predictions. People will famously, not famously, but know that I refuse to say the words win or loss during the Giants' last Super Bowl run. And that's exactly why they won the Super Bowl. No big deal. Anyway.
You guys are in for a rough season, so hold on to that.
It culminated in me actually going and getting nosebleed seats with my dad. We had to stay in a smoking room motel because all the hotel rooms were out in Indianapolis, but I got to witness the Giants win the Super Bowl. So very cool.
Oh, hell yeah. That's a crazy ass game too, by the way.
It was not the undefeated season, but it was the one after that, which still had the Mario Manningham catch. But anyway, yes. So I'm getting off track. Long story short, yeah, I think that the Republicans are kind of fulfilling the prophecy that Mitch McConnell said a few years ago as it related to Donald Trump, where they have to go along with it because the base is supportive of Donald Trump, but they can't expand outside of the party in terms of some sort of majoritarian vision. Trump has become such a toxic brand for them that they can't both energize the base in this bind that they're in and then also appeal to the majority of Americans. So I'm not exactly sure what that looks like. But I mean, Nikki Haley said it best, right? They're going to replay that on ads going forward, which is that whoever replaces their octogenarian or elderly candidate first is going to be the party that does best. And I think that prediction is correct. Where the Republicans go, I'm not exactly sure. I think it's going to be more of an immigration-focused party going forward, as we're seeing some of the far-right parties in Europe focus on, whether it be Marine Le Pen, whether it be Giorgia Meloni in Italy, and also the Tories attempted to adopt this to less success after losing to Labour, before losing to Labour, where it's basically focused on border fascism, making sure certain kinds of people stay out of our country. We'll do free, trains and planes throughout the rest of white Europe. Don't worry about it. And hey, people can come over the border from Canada in this country. Doesn't matter. But if you're a certain shade of person, we're going to demonize you and talk about how it's an invasion. So
it's the old Family Guy meme where they're like going down the skin tones.
And I think, right. And I think that we have such little, class consciousness in this country, and so much more racial animus than we care to admit, that may be an effective tactic. But without their cult of personality at the top of the cult, I don't know how they move forward, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's a demagogue driven ideology for sure.